Well, hello. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about the writing process and the very beginning of it, actually. My name is Mrs. Duncan. I teach the English 101 on campus and online, and I just wanted to go through this step in case you missed it or didn't know what it was. But it is the first step in the writing process. Now, maybe you have heard of brainstorming, collecting ideas. I hope it didn't look anything like this with brains falling out of the sky. But yes, in job situations you do something very similar. It's called brainstorming. You get a group of people together and you try to gather ideas. Pre-writing is very similar to that. Also known as invention. So in your books, textbooks, you'll see a chapter. No matter what textbook you're looking at for English 101, it's going to have a chapter on invention. So it's a great resource for you to look at examples and kind of take a look at some of the things there. But they'll call it invention. It's the first step in the writing process. We approach the teaching of writing as a process. It's not just sit down and write whatever comes to your head for the topic that you've been given. I mean, you are certainly capable of doing that, or you wouldn't be in English 101. But English 101 is about how do we make it better. And so we take every skill and every step in the process towards getting a solid paper, and we've broken it down into several steps. And the first one is called pre-writing. It's how you gather your ideas. If you do that while you're trying to draft, inevitably you're going to think of something later, or you're going to exhaust your brain very quickly on your ideas, and then you'll be done, and you say, I can't think of anything else. And that would be true for that moment. This is a way of gathering ideas for the development of a draft that's acceptable at the college level. Usually it happens by yourself, but it can be in a group. It can be with another person. Maybe you need to bounce ideas off of another person through a conversation. Maybe you will need to take a look at, if you're doing a research type of paper, you're going to have to look outside of yourself. And you may have to look at and read some articles and get some ideas. Sometimes we start the idea process in the classroom, and sometimes you're given a topic and asked to kind of, hey, what does this make you think of? Jot down some ideas. So it can happen either way, as long as the list of ideas you come up with are your own, that you decided that you want to use. So when does this happen? It's the first step. It should happen right after you've either been given a topic or that you have selected an overall topic for an essay assignment. In an exam, if you have an essay question, you're given a topic, and you're expected to have ideas about it based on your study in that history class or the philosophy class or whatever, or psychology class. In English, we may give you a broad set of topics. We may give you one specific topic. And whatever it is, you should pre-write right away. What comes to your mind? And that's what it is. It's a list of those ideas. But, you might not be able to think of everything right off the cuff. Maybe you're having a difficult morning and you need to kind of come back to that. So you write down everything you can think of. You're not worried about what order you thought of them in. You're not trying to compose sentences. You're just trying to what words come to your head. And then maybe later the day, maybe the next day, because there's usually several days between getting a topic assignment and having to turn in pre-writing, because we know it is a process of thinking. You come back to it a little bit later and look at your list and see what else that you might add to it. But you do it before you start drafting. You do it before you outline. Now, how do you pre-write? There are many ways, and it's very personal. If you look in the invention chapter of your textbook, you're going to see things like clusters and pre-writing and journaling and webs and lists. I'll show you a few pictures, examples. And whatever process works for you is fine, but when you turn it in, I want you to make a bullet list of your ideas. This is very important. This is not a drafting stage, so I do not want paragraphs for pre-writing. Here's some samples, just some random ones. This is more of a web. It can look kind of this one's very nice and organized, and you start with a topic in the middle, and then you kind of come out to like a main idea, and they're using the writing process as their topic, and then you shoot off ideas from that. Well, what's involved in pre-writing? Well, that could be pre-writing or in clustering or outlining could be involved. Oh, I might need a research, might need an interview. Yeah, I have to outline. I might have to go to the library, may use the internet. So as ideas expand off of each other. That's the idea there. This one on the right is probably a little more realistic. Sometimes this one has a thesis statement underneath. This one starts kind of with some of these little bubble ideas and branches out. This one says examples of success. This one talks about interpersonal communication because it's centered around communication technology. They color-coded it. They made it's partially lists, partially bubbles. It's just a good example of how you can use a lot of different techniques to come up with ideas. The important thing is that you just think of them as they come to you and you try to put them in a little bit of a category that makes sense as they come along. Now here's what I would want after you did that. After you kind of brainstormed, after you kind of webbed or clustered, you would have a list of ideas that you thought you would actually use. And or maybe this is how you brainstorm. Maybe you just jot down the words in order. They didn't have a web and they didn't have an order, okay? And that would be fine. These are not actually bullets. These would be little X's. I would prefer little round bullets, and where you would have a topic and then you would just make that list. It's very, very simple. Topic. This is just an example. You wouldn't be given this topic for English 101. But if you had something as broad as food, just what would you think of besides just the food you eat? You know, different words. From there, you would be selective. But that's another step in the process. So why do this? Why not just sit down and just start writing? Why do we even have this step in the process? Well, it doesn't take very long to do, but it is very productive. Students, when they're ready to draft, are less likely to go blank and run out of ideas because they've already gone through the brainstorming process, and they can always add more. The other thing they've found through research is that this kind of lets your mind focus in on one process, just brainstorming. Your mind is not under the pressure of creating sentences or paragraphs, or what's the correct grammar for this? What's the correct spelling? So that your brain is overtaxed with all these other things that it has to do. It's only just coming up with ideas. And so it can maximize your energy, your effort, all your resources just on coming up with ideas. Plus, it doesn't matter what order they come in. And usually the ideas that come from our mind are rather random and not in an organized order that we need when we're ready to draft. So it utilizes the best possibility for our brain to come up with ideas without cluttering it up with all the other expectations. And if you go through this process, it seems so much less stressful, and yet it's much more productive. All right, I have a couple of resources that you can look at where I've never heard of clustering, or I don't know if I would want to do a web, that you can see these and more examples in your Little Brown Handbook if you're in the 7th edition. It's pages 8 through 13. If you're in a different edition than these, like I said, look in the table of contents, look in Invention for that chapter, and you'll see those words clusters and free writing and webs, and you can look at those examples. In the 12th edition of Patterns, really focus in on pages 34 to 43, but again, it's in the chapter on invention. I hope you can see that pre-writing is not very difficult. Don't make it harder than it is. It'll be very productive for you if you'll just use it to brainstorm and then get the instruction you need to move on to an outline, which is step 2.